You scroll through your phone and see the announcements, engagements, promotions, new homes, new babies, new launches, new milestones. And there you are, feeling like your life is moving in slow motion while everyone else is sprinting ahead. If that is where you are right now, hear this carefully. You are not broken, you are not failing, and you are not too late. You are torturing yourself with a false timeline. Today, I am going to walk you through a timeline alignment framework so you can stop comparing, start building, and finally understand the hidden power of the waiting room. Because some of you are not just dealing with delay, you are dealing with pressure. The pressure of where you thought you would be by now. The pressure of birthdays. The pressure of expectations. The pressure of watching the calendar move while your life seems to stay still. And that pressure is not small. It gets into your body. It follows you into the mirror. It sits next to you when you wake up. It whispers to you when you see someone else win. It turns ordinary days into silent verdicts against your worth. That is the prison of expectations. Not just wanting more, feeling condemned because it has not happened yet. Maybe you thought by now you would be married. Maybe by now you thought the business would be stable. Maybe you thought you would have left that city, paid off that debt, found your direction, become visible, become secure, become settled. And because reality does not match the inner deadline, you have started talking to yourself like a failure. That is what makes false timelines so cruel. They do not just make you impatient, they make you violent with yourself. You stop seeing your life as a process. You start seeing it as evidence that you are behind. So let me ask you directly, who told you that you needed to be there by 30, or by 25, or by 35, or by this year, or by now? Who told you that? Was it wisdom, or was it pressure dressed up as wisdom? Was it actually your path? Or was it a collection of borrowed expectations that got installed in your mind so early, so often, that you stopped questioning them? Because most people do not consciously choose their timelines. They absorb them. From family, from school, from culture, from comparison, from social media, from watching other people hit visible milestones and quietly deciding that their pace now defines your worth. That is how timeline anxiety gets built. Not through one moment, through repetition, through being shown over and over what success is supposed to look like, when it is supposed to happen, and how far behind you must be if your story is not matching the script. And the dangerous thing is, once that script gets inside you, it starts controlling how you interpret everything. A closed door is no longer just a closed door. It becomes proof you are late. A quiet season is no longer just a quiet season. It becomes proof you missed your chance. Another person's breakthrough is no longer just their breakthrough. It becomes evidence against your future. That is what false timelines do. They turn neutral events into personal accusations. And after enough of that, you begin living with constant inner harassment. You cannot even enjoy your own process because you are too busy measuring it against someone else's pace. You cannot see what is forming because you are obsessed with what has not happened yet. You cannot respect what is being built in private because your mind only honors what is visible. This is the twist you need right now. You are running a race you never signed up for. Let that land. You are exhausting yourself trying to keep up with a timeline that may not even belong to your life. You are punishing yourself according to standards that were assembled by pressure, ego, fear, and comparison. Not by truth, not by your actual assignment, not by what your life truly requires to become strong. Some of you have been measuring a deep, complex, custom-built path against mass-produced cultural milestones. Of course it feels like you are losing. You are using the wrong scoreboard. And maybe that is why you feel so tired. Not because life is impossible, because internally you are running two lives at the same time. The one you are actually in, and the one you think you should have achieved by now. That split drains people. It makes them bitter in seasons that should have been formative. It makes them overlook what is working because it does not look dramatic enough. It makes them rush things that need depth. It makes them force doors that are not ready. It makes them marry from panic, launch from insecurity, move from comparison, spend from image, and agree to paths they never truly wanted, just so they can finally stop feeling behind. That is how people build lives they cannot sustain. Not because they lack talent, because they were trying to escape shame. And shame is a terrible architect. So let us name the sources of timeline anxiety clearly. The first source is social conditioning. The messages about what should happen when. The second source is comparison. Watching other people's visible milestones and mistaking visibility for completion. The third source is wounded ego, the part of you that feels humiliated by not being seen as successful yet. That is to recap: conditioning, comparison, wounded ego. Those three forces create a false clock in the mind. And once that clock starts ruling you, peace disappears, because every month becomes a judgment. Every birthday becomes a crisis. Every delay becomes an identity attack. But the truth is, your life is not late just because it is not matching a borrowed schedule. And that leads to the next thing you need to understand. There is a major difference between delay and denial, because many of you have labeled the season over when it was actually still developing underground. You saw slowness and called it failure. You saw quiet and called it absence. You saw non-movement on the surface and assumed nothing meaningful was happening. But life does not work that way. Some of the strongest things grow invisibly first. That is why the bamboo tree metaphor matters so much. For years, that tree appears to do almost nothing above ground. You water it, you wait, you see little. Nothing dramatic, nothing impressive, nothing that would make outsiders clap. But underneath the surface, the root system is spreading, deepening, strengthening, preparing to hold what eventually rises fast. Then one day, the visible growth comes, and it comes quickly. But what looks sudden was actually supported by an invisible season no one respected because no one could see it. That is how many lives work. And because people do not understand root seasons, they call themselves failures in the middle of preparation. They insult the very ground that is trying to make them stable. They despise the waiting room because they think nothing is happening there. But the waiting room is often where the roots are getting deep enough to hold the weight of what is coming. So let me ask you this honestly. Are your roots deep enough yet? Not your desire, not your fantasy, not your impatience. Your roots. Is your character ready? Is your capacity ready? Is your emotional stability ready? Is your discipline ready? Is your self-trust ready? Is your inner world strong enough to hold what you keep begging to receive? Because a lot of people want visible fruit without invisible formation. They want speed without structure. They want elevation without grounding. They want doors to open before their internal life is mature enough to walk through them well. And that is how fast blessings turn into fast breakdowns. This is the twist. Fast success usually causes fast collapse. People love speed until speed exposes weakness. They want the sudden platform, the sudden money, the sudden relationship, the sudden breakthrough. But if the foundation is shallow, quick arrival becomes quick unraveling. You can get the opportunity and still lose it. You can get the relationship and still sabotage it. You can get the promotion and still crack under the pressure. You can get seen before you are internally stable enough to stay clear while being seen. That is why delay is not always punishment. Sometimes delay is protection. Sometimes delay is construction. Sometimes delay is mercy, because what looks like slowness may actually be the time required to build a life that does not collapse the second it starts moving. And this is where many people need a serious reframe. Delay is not denial. Delay means not yet. Denial means not this. Those are not the same thing. And when you confuse them, you start grieving things that are still in development. You start abandoning paths that still need time. You start treating the middle like the end. That is where people lose heart too soon, because they were expecting immediate surface evidence from a process that is still building underground. Think about how often this shows up in real life. You are developing skills no one sees. You are healing patterns that used to sabotage everything. You are learning how to manage your emotions without collapsing. You are refining your voice. You are building consistency. You are becoming someone who can actually sustain what once would have crushed you. But because none of that posts well, because none of that looks glamorous, because none of that gets public applause, you are tempted to call it nothing. It is not nothing. It is root work. And root work is holy work. The world does not celebrate roots, but roots decide whether the visible life can stand. That is why you cannot afford to despise this season. Not every waiting room is wasted. Some waiting rooms are classrooms. Some are construction zones. Some are detox seasons, where comparison, pride, fantasy, and fragile identity have to be stripped out before your next level can be carried with wisdom. And yes, that can be frustrating. especially when other people seem to be moving faster, especially when the people around you are asking questions you do not want to answer, especially when you are tired of saying, "I'm still figuring it out," especially when you feel that deep physical ache of wondering if your life will ever fully open. That feeling is real, but do not let real frustration talk you into false conclusions. You are not behind just because your roots are still developing. You are not forgotten just because the surface is quiet. You are not denied just because your timeline has depth built into it. Some of you needed to hear that with force, because you have been equating visibility with validity for too long, and it has been harming you. You've been treating external speed like proof of internal readiness. It is not. There are people moving fast toward things they are not built to keep. There are people being applauded in seasons that are quietly hollow. There are people announcing what looks like arrival while privately holding together a structure that is already cracking. So do not envy fast if you do not know what it is standing on. Do not worship speed if you do not know what it is costing. And do not curse your own slower season if that slower season is building a foundation that will let you stand when things finally move. Let us recap this second layer clearly. Delay is not the same as denial. Invisible growth is still growth, and fast success without deep roots usually creates fast collapse. That is the truth. And once you stop fighting that truth, something in you starts softening, not into passivity, into alignment. You stop demanding proof from the soil every 5 seconds. You stop calling every quiet season a dead season. You start asking a better question. What is being built in me while this is still being built for me? That question changes everything, because the waiting room stops feeling like a punishment once you understand what it is producing. And that is exactly where we're going next. You are starting to see it now. The delay is not empty. The quiet is not proof of failure. The surface is not telling the whole story. But once you accept that, another question rises. What are you actually supposed to do in this season? Because one of the biggest mistakes people make in the waiting room is treating it like a holding cell. They sit there emotionally frozen, resentful, passive, checking the door every 5 minutes, wondering why nothing is moving. But the waiting room was never meant to be a place of emotional paralysis. It is an incubation phase, a hidden building phase, a season where certain things are not yet visible because they are still becoming strong enough to last. And if you understand that, you stop wasting the delay. You stop using the season only to worry. You start using it to build. This is where the waiting room changes from punishment to preparation, because there are tasks assigned to this season. Real tasks, not vague spiritual language. Work that matters. Formation that counts. And if you skip this work because you are too obsessed with visible results, you can arrive in the next season, weak, scattered, and unready to hold what you prayed for. So let us make it plain. There are 3 tasks of the waiting room. First, stabilization. Second, skill building. Third, identity strengthening. That is the recap. Stabilize, build skill, strengthen identity. Those 3 things change everything. Stabilization means you learn how to stop emotionally collapsing every time the timeline does not match your preference. It means you stop making your worth depend on visible progress. It means your mood is no longer entirely determined by whether something happened this week. Some of you need that deeply, because right now, one disappointment can wipe out your whole sense of direction. One delay can pull you into panic. 1 month of quiet can make you question your entire future. That instability is exhausting, and if it is not addressed, success will not heal it. It will magnify it. If your inner world is fragile in obscurity, visibility will only expose that fragility faster. So, stabilization matters. It looks like learning how to keep showing up without daily emotional drama. It looks like getting grounded enough that a closed door does not become a full identity crisis. It looks like being able to say, nothing visible shifted today, but I am still building. That is power. That is maturity. That is how the waiting room begins to work for you instead of against you. The second task is skill building. And this is where many people miss the entire assignment. They think because the breakthrough has not happened yet, there is nothing meaningful to do. That is not true. Some of the most important years of your life may be years where the main assignment is not visibility, it is skill, quiet skill, uncelebrated skill. The kind that does not get applause while it is being built, but changes everything when the opportunity finally appears. This is what I mean by skill stacking in the dark. You are learning one thing here, another thing there, a communication skill, a discipline skill, a technical skill, a leadership skill, a spiritual skill, an emotional regulation skill, a consistency skill. And while none of them seem dramatic by themselves, together they create a version of you that can move differently when the door opens. That matters more than people realize, because what looks like sudden success on the outside is often just hidden skill stacked over time. Think of the person who seems to rise quickly. What others do not see is the private repetition, the nights they practiced with no audience, the seasons they learned how to focus, the months they kept creating while nobody noticed, the awkward first attempts, the small improvements, the invisible discipline. That is skill stacking in the dark, and it is one of the holiest uses of a slow season, because it keeps you from worshiping timing while neglecting preparation. It keeps you from saying, "When my season comes, then I'll get serious." No, get serious now. Build now. Sharpen now. Practice now, so that when the pace changes, you are not just excited, you are ready. Which brings me to the question you need to ask yourself honestly. What can you master right now? Not someday. Not when your life looks more impressive. Right now. What is available in this season that you can actually become excellent at? Can you master consistency? Can you master your craft? Can you master focus? Can you master emotional steadiness? Can you master your mornings? Can you master your mornings? Can you master discipline when no one is watching? Because there is always something to master in the waiting room. Always. The problem is not that the season is empty. The problem is that people often disrespect what the season is offering because it does not look glamorous enough. And that is how years get wasted. Not because nothing was there, because the person was too busy staring at someone else's timeline to develop the tools hiding inside their own. The third task of the waiting room is identity strengthening. This one goes deeper than skill, because skill teaches you what to do. Identity determines what you can sustain. If you still see yourself as behind, lesser, forgotten, unlucky, overlooked, late, or unqualified, that identity will contaminate how you move when the next season arrives. You will hesitate inside opportunities. You will mistrust increase. You will self-sabotage momentum. You will downplay what is opening because your inner identity still feels more at home in lack, delay, and almost. That is why the waiting room often has to confront who you believe you are, not the polished answer, the real answer. Who are you when no one is affirming you? Who are you when nothing visible is proving your worth? Who are you when the external timeline is not cooperating? Can you still respect yourself there? Can you still work there? Can you still build there? Can you still believe that your life has momentum even when it is quiet? That is identity strengthening, and it is not optional. Because if you do not build identity in obscurity, you will spend visible seasons begging them to confirm what should have already been settled inside you. This is why some of the most important work in a delay is internal, not because internal work is all that matters. Because internal work determines how you carry external change. And once you understand those three tasks, the waiting room stops feeling like dead space. It becomes strategic. It becomes active. It becomes sacred, which is exactly why comparison is so dangerous in this season. Because comparison blinds you to your actual assignment. It makes you look sideways when you should be looking inward. It makes you despise your process because someone else's process is louder. It makes you feel late in a room where you were supposed to be learning. And social media makes this worse, because most people are not comparing their private formation to someone else's full reality. They are comparing their behind-the-scenes life to somebody else's edited outcomes. That is the twist. Their highlight reel is heavily edited. The announcement is real, but the context is missing. The smiling photo is real, but the conflict is missing. The promotion is real, but the years of uncertainty before it are missing. The engagement post is real, but the messy emotional history before it is missing. The overnight success is real, but the quiet decade underneath it is missing. And when you forget that, comparison becomes poison. You scroll for 5 minutes and suddenly your whole life feels small. You were fine before the app opened. Now your chest is tight. Now your timeline feels humiliating. Now your own path looks inferior. Now you want to rush something just to stop feeling left behind. That is not inspiration, that is contamination. And a lot of people keep calling it motivation because they are addicted to the emotional spike. But deep down, they know it is harming them. They know it. You look at certain people and immediately feel agitation. You start measuring, start narrating, start shrinking, start hearing that internal clock get louder again. I should be there by now. What is wrong with me? Why is everyone moving but me? That is why detaching from comparison is not weakness, it is wisdom. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is stop exposing your nervous system to material that consistently distorts your peace, which is where a practical rule becomes necessary. The social media detox rule. If someone's content repeatedly triggers shame, hurry, inadequacy, panic, or false urgency, reduce access, not because they are evil. Because your mind matters, because your season matters, because your focus matters. For some of you, that means muting. That simple. Muting triggers. Not making a speech, not announcing a cleanse, not pretending you are above being affected, just quietly removing repeated friction from your field. There is wisdom in that. You do not owe your attention to content that constantly unsettles your sense of timing. You do not owe front row access to people whose visibility keeps making you despise your own formation. You do not owe comparison a daily seat at your table. This is not about becoming disconnected from reality. It is about becoming selective enough to protect clarity, mute what distorts, limit what agitates, reduce what makes you reactive. Because every trigger you keep feeding becomes harder to outgrow. And the more you detox from comparison, the more something beautiful starts to happen. You return to your actual life. You notice your actual work. You respect your actual progress. You begin seeing that while other people were posting milestones, you were building depth. While other people were announcing outcomes, you were developing roots. While other people were being seen, you were becoming someone who could actually sustain what being seen requires. That is not less valuable. That is just less visible. And if you can make peace with that, your life starts getting stronger in a way comparison never could have produced. Because now your energy is not leaking sideways. Now it is going into formation. Now it is going into skill. Now it is going into identity. Now it is going into preparation that will matter when the pace changes. And trust me, the pace can change faster than you think. But if you do not learn to respect the incubation phase, you will keep trying to escape the very season that is preparing your acceleration. And this is the part many people miss because they are still staring at the clock. The shift rarely starts as fireworks. It starts as subtle momentum, a little more clarity, a little more steadiness, a little less panic in the waiting, a little more power in your daily rhythm. That is why I need to ask you something honestly. Do you feel the subtle momentum? Not the huge breakthrough yet, not the dramatic announcement. The subtle momentum. Do you notice that you are reacting less emotionally than you used to? Do you notice that your work is getting cleaner? Do you notice that what once threw you into despair now only slows you down for an hour instead of a week? Do you notice that you are not reaching for comparison as quickly? Do you notice that your discipline is becoming less forced? That matters, because the ending of delay often begins quietly. It begins with internal movement before external evidence catches up. You start waking up with more focus. You stop begging the season to be different every morning. You stop treating each day like a referendum on your worth. You get better at your craft, better at your habits, better at your mindset, better at carrying uncertainty without collapsing. That is not nothing. That is the shift. A lot of people miss it because they are waiting for proof big enough to impress other people. But the real breakthrough usually begins in private. It begins when your inner world stops fighting the season it is in. That is the twist. The breakthrough often happens when you finally make peace with the wait, not because passivity creates miracles, because resistance stops wasting your strength. The moment you stop burning energy resenting the timeline, you suddenly have more energy to build inside it. The moment you stop calling yourself behind, your focus comes back. The moment you stop demanding that life prove itself to you every 5 minutes, your hands become free to work again. That is when things start moving, quietly at first, then faster than you expected. So let us name the signs that delay is ending. First, your panic is decreasing. You still want movement, but you are no longer emotionally unraveling every day it does not happen. Second, Your capacity is increasing. You are stronger now than you were when this season started. More focused, more grounded, more skilled. Third, opportunities are starting to feel less foreign. You are noticing ideas, openings, relationships, and possibilities without instantly shrinking from them. That is the recap. Less panic, more capacity, a growing ability to recognize and hold opportunity. Those are signs, and when those signs begin showing up, do not ignore them just because they are subtle. That subtle movement is often the sound of the season turning. This is where you have to stay awake, because after a long delay, people can get so used to waiting that they do not know how to move when the pace finally changes. They prayed for acceleration, but built habits around hesitation. They asked for the open door, but got emotionally attached to preparation mode. So when momentum arrives, they second-guess it. They overanalyze it. They miss the window because they were still expecting another year of quiet. Do not do that, because one of the strangest things about delayed seasons is this: when they break, they often break quickly. Like a slingshot, you pull back for what feels like forever. Tension, stillness, restraint, hidden pressure, and then suddenly all that backward tension becomes forward force. That is the slingshot effect. It looked like you were being held back, but some of that restraint was actually storing force. Some of that quiet was concentrating strength. Some of that waiting was building precision. And when release comes, it is not random. It is the result of everything that was being formed while you thought nothing was happening. That is why I need to ask you this with force. Are you ready to move fast? Not just emotionally ready, practically ready. If the call came, are you ready? If the opportunity opened, are you ready? If the relationship aligned, are you ready? If the platform grew, the job came, the offer landed, the momentum shifted, are you still preparing in theory, or are you prepared enough to execute? Because this final part is not just about hope, it is about readiness. The delay taught you how to build roots. Now acceleration will require trust, decisiveness, and movement. No more endless circling. No more romanticizing the waiting room once the door has opened. No more using caution as a disguise for fear. There is a time to incubate, and there is a time to run. You need discernment for both, and hear this carefully. What took them 10 years may take you 10 months. That is the twist, not because you are better than anyone else, because depth compresses time, because hidden preparation shortens visible execution, because when roots are deep, movement can happen fast without collapse. Some people spent years learning in public what you learned in private. Some people gathered slowly what you have been stacking in the dark. Some people needed a decade because they were building while distracted, fragmented, and externally driven. You are being stripped, refined, focused, and strengthened in silence. So when your pace changes, do not compare the speed of your execution to the slowness of your preparation. They are not the same phase, and do not apologize when your life starts moving. Do not talk yourself out of acceleration just because you got used to delay. Do not mistrust momentum, because it came after a long, quiet season. You asked to be prepared. Now let preparation speak. Move clearly, move cleanly, move without dragging your old timeline shame into a new season, because that shame does not belong where you are going. You are not the person who was panicking in the beginning. You are not the person who thought delay meant denial. You are not the person who needed public proof every week to believe your life was still unfolding. You have more roots now, more skill, more discernment, more stamina. And that means when it is time to execute, you can execute with force. This is how you stop feeling behind. You stop worshiping false clocks. You stop measuring your worth by other people's milestones. You stop misreading the waiting room. You stop calling hidden formation wasted time. And then when the shift comes, you do not freeze, you move. That is the timeline alignment framework. Release the borrowed deadline. Respect the root season. Use the waiting room well. Detach from comparison. Recognize the shift. And when the pace changes, execute like someone who understands exactly what the slow season built. You were never as late as your fear told you. You were being built in ways that could not be rushed. And now, the same season you once resented may become the reason your next season is strong. If this gave language to what you have been carrying, and it helped you breathe again inside your own process, stay with this message when the old timeline panic tries to come back.